Dameon Pierce has yet to be named the starter, but is he already a top 15 running back in Dynasty? That more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, instead of just kicking it to you like I usually do, let's just go through a little exercise with this because we're going to have people torn right off the bat with Dameon Pierce as a top 15 running back. You're going to have some people who are super hyped about how he's looked in the preseason. You're going to have some people who think that they just need to turn this off because that's completely ridiculous to even contemplate. But it is an important conversation, and you can take Dameon Pierce's name out of it. And let's just talk about, you could talk about a 22-year-old running back that you could see carrying 60 to 65% of the backfield and talk about where they should be ranked. So not just currently actionable, but actionable indefinitely in Dynasty Fantasy Football. How should we be viewing these type of guys? So I updated my rankings today. Full disclosure, he's running back 16 for me currently. That is right behind. I still have Kenneth Walker ahead of him by one spot. That's right behind Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, some of those guys. So what I want to do, Chris, is bring you into the conversation with some of the guys who are ranked ahead of him. And let's just say we don't really have to look exactly a year from now, but let's just look ahead a little bit, assume that Dameon Pierce gets the role that we think he has, and see maybe it's worth being a little early. So feel free to go off on any tangent you need to and on any of the guys that we compare him to. But let's start right around running back 9 with Joe Mixon. So Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce.
I think I'd probably still keep Mixon.
Yeah, so I'll still keep Mixon now currently too. If we got 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns out of Dameon Pierce next year, we're talking about Joe Mixon being 27. That'll be a little bit closer. But
yeah, I still think you got a couple more years with Mixon.
Okay, so definitely thought that we were going to get Mixon, but interesting ones. Derrick Henry coming off of an injury, going to turn 29. Derrick Henry or Dameon Pierce?
Oh, Dameon Pierce. That's an easy one for me because if you look at, it's not just, and I was just talking about this on an earlier program. It's not just about Derrick Henry, the age, and even the injury concern, like portion of it from last season. I can kind of sweep all that stuff under the rug. I mean, because injuries typically, those are just from the season beforehand. We don't we don't consider Derrick Henry to be injury prone.
Yeah, all accounts healthy currently.
I mean, so that's that. The age thing, I mean, okay, fine. Running backs like getting into the 28, 29, 30, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. But for me, it's just about the entire context of the Titans offense, like in and of itself. It's the team that was number 1 in the AFC just last season, not like 10 months ago. This was a team that held like the number 1 seed in the AFC. They lost to my Bengals, cool and all. But with the loss, they traded away their number 1 asset, like on the team. Yeah. And with the assets that they recouped in the deal, you didn't see them immediately reload at that position. This is a team that they've got expiring contracts like coming their way. Derrick Henry being one of them, like coming up next season when his contract is out. Ryan Tannehill, his contract should be up, or at least they could get out of his contract in 2023. So between that and also some of the contracts that they've got on the defense, this is a situation that's degrading around Derrick Henry. Upswing for Treylon Burks. I mean, upswing if you even if you're stashing guys like Nick Westbrook-Keeney like on the back end of your roster, sure. Even Dontrell Hilliard, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But for Derrick Henry himself, I mean, but this is a team that lost Saffold and Quessenberry on the offensive line. This is a team that went from top 5, top 7 in adjusted line yards, according to Football Outsiders, to average. I mean, they were 16th, 17th. And the only thing that they added at the position throughout the offseason was third-round rookie out of Ohio State. So, again, this is an offense that was predicated on explosives on the run game through Derrick Henry, explosives to the passing game, having one of the best route runners in terms of creating separation at the short, intermediate, and deep levels of the field in A.J. Brown. They don't have that anymore. So how many, mega stacked boxes do you think Derrick Henry is going to have to run through this season versus in seasons past where you do have an actual threat from an aerial standpoint in A.J. Brown? They don't have that. Treylon Burks is not A.J. Brown. Treylon Burks is definitely not going to be A.J. Brown in week 1. He's probably not going to be A.J. Brown in week 13, 14,
probably
15.
Ever.
So it's just this entire situation around Derrick Henry, agnostic of where Derrick Henry is at as a player. It's just the entire situation around him is not something that I want to invest in for running back that requires literally like he requires a runway in order to get him going. Like he will have like the runs of 4, -2, 1, 2, 1, 87. How many of those can you really expect him to have when now defenses are going to be just keying on the fact that he's their only threat? What's Robert Woods going to be doing deep?
He's one of the most productive backs with stacked boxes in NFL history because he's Derrick Henry. But
it's just everything else around him has deteriorated. So it's difficult for me at this point, on top of the other stuff that we already mentioned, that it's just, I would much rather have Dameon Pierce.
Derrick Henry has 2 positives. 1, he's Derrick Henry. 2, he's going to have historic volume. Every single other aspect of the rest of his career is negative. So everybody stay with us. We've given a 26-year-old back who was in a productive offense in Joe Mixon. And we've given you a 29-year-old back who's kind of hitting an age cliff and really probably a touch cliff as well. Let's get into kind of an interesting conversation. I have Dameon Pierce 1 pick ahead of Cam Akers. So Cam Akers, comparable in age, better offense, but coming off the injury, would you rather Cam Akers or Dameon Pierce?
I would rather Cam Akers, and this kind of dovetails, or not dovetails, but it kind of goes back to the negatives for Derrick Henry and like talking about the situation, because what is one of the greatest components of fantasy production for a running back? It's touchdowns. You need an offense that's efficient enough or explosive enough to get you within the red zone in order to create those money touches that you need for it to be a running back. When Derrick Henry in his heyday, like in 2019 and 2020, when he was either the rushing leader or like the RB1 in fantasy, right, he was tied for first in 2019 in terms for rushing touchdowns. He was first in 2020. And that's when he was top 10 in red zone rushing attempts, like throughout the entire, like for the entire season. Like, can Tennessee's offense generate that much efficiency in order to get him there into the red zone in order to have those touches? And I would ask the same thing of Cam Akers. I think the Rams, at least this season, and likely in 2024 as well, they should be efficient enough, more efficient than the Texans, I would assume, at getting Cam Akers into the red zone, like where he's actually going to be getting those touches. And then we can get into the conversation of whether or not Akers or Hendo are going to be getting those touches.
Yeah,
but at the very least, that's the worry. But at least for right now, who has the offense in order to get more of those touches? I don't care about the split. I'm just saying, like, how much more often are the Rams going to be in the red zone than the Texans? Quite a bit more.
Right. If you double it, then what's it matter that Cam Akers gets 50%?
Bingo.
It's the same. Right.
Yeah. That's my argument.
I see that. One thing that I've been trying to do this offseason is be more objective about running backs in my dynasty rankings and accept the fact that NFL franchises are incentivized to have multiple running backs. So it's no longer a knock for a running back to be getting 50% or even sometimes less and still being the, better fantasy option. We might see that this year with Aaron Jones being a better fantasy option than AJ Dillon, but getting slightly less volume. I think that's going to happen a lot more, and it's something that we need to adjust to. And it's not necessarily a knock on Cam Akers anymore, but why would we be giving Cam Akers coming off the injury and a soft tissue injury, which tends to happen, coming off of like a major injury like an Achilles and all that rehab they do, they end up from doctors, not me, not a doctor, overcompensating on some of those injuries. And that's how you get some soft tissue issues that you have to deal with in the year after. So that's why people say that these players are typically better 2 years after injury. Well, with running backs, those years are so valuable. Like with Derrick Henry and Dameon Pierce, you're buying 7 years by downgrading from Derrick Henry to Dameon Pierce. That's, it's tough. It's tough because Dameon Pierce is that 4th round rookie who did not get a ton of volume at Florida. And I tell you what, Florida fans don't know why he didn't. They think he was the best player on their offense, and they don't really understand why he didn't get so much volume, but he didn't. So it's a really tough profile. Let's go through one more. I have Dameon Pierce 2 picks behind Nick Chubb. What do you think about Nick Chubb versus Dameon Pierce?
I think in that standpoint, I think I probably still want Nick Chubb, to be quite honest. I know that the second contract or whatever, but now regardless of what you think about the situation, that man that's supposed to be playing under center for them does at least not for most of this year, but at least for 2023 moving forward, does provide a boost in efficiency for the offense. So again, if we're talking about tiebreakers in terms of how often a player can get in the red zone in order to create those money touches that they need, my thought is, at least in 2023, not in 2022, the Browns should be capable of getting those money touches to him. And looking already, like, kind of reading the tea leaves, at the very least, one of the two running backs alongside Nick Chubb are supposed to be gone. Kareem Hunt has already at least intimated that he is
but
ready
they're not going
to,
to deliver on that.
but not for this year,
They've got him
but in
locked up.
23,
Maybe.
or either him or Dearness Johnson
Sure.
could go. So at the very least, it lessens the competition for work once they get into the red zone. Because the biggest bugaboo for Nick Chubb has been, well, once they get in there, they pull him, and then Kareem Hunt comes in. So if Hunt is the one that gets out and he's the one that's traded, all the better for Nick Chubb at the very least. But again, looking at just the efficiency, or like comparing the efficiency rates like between the two offenses, I think I'll take Chubb, but I understand why folks would want the shiny new toy in Pierce.
Yeah, and if I had to put my money on somebody who could replicate Derrick Henry's career arc, it would probably be Nick Chubb. But we could argue if that's a good thing or not with the changing NFL landscape. I think that Dameon Pierce is going to surpass Nick Chubb in my rankings sooner than later. But the point of this exercise was to show that Dameon Pierce belongs amongst these names that we have thought of as top 12 running backs for the past since 2017. And you have to think back in 2017 with that loaded class, all of these running backs in 2017 supplanted like stalwarts above them for years and years. And that's just because when you have running backs that come in with opportunity, Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara was probably the Dameon Pierce in this situation, in that he was a late riser. So it just happened. So if you want to leave this conversation saying, I'm not buying it, all I saw was Dameon Pierce in the preseason, might I add, it's not just what beat reporters have been saying, and it's not just being a little bit productive in the preseason. What really matters is Dameon Pierce sat in week 2 of the preseason, started in week 3 of the preseason. Lovie Smith is as old school as it gets. He came out and he said, Dameon Pierce is not our starter. I would bet a lot of money that Dameon Pierce gets the most touches in week 1, and he's going to lead in every statistical category for running backs throughout the season. So if Lovie Smith likes his job, he's probably going to start Dameon Pierce over Marlon Mack. Love the story. I'm glad Marlon Mack came back from an Achilles injury. And Rex Burkhead, how do you not like Rex Burkhead? Does not matter.
Sure.
Does not matter. It is not plus EV to have someone that's not Dameon Pierce leading this backfield. So if you asked me last year, you put me in front of a camera and a microphone last year, and we had this Dameon Pierce situation, I'm probably saying stand pat. And then I'm going to be late to the ranking, and then I'm not going to have any Dameon Pierce, and I'm going to be stuck holding the bag with Leonard Fournette in 2 years. But now trying to take an objective look at the league and just I'd rather be a little early with running. Running backs are so hard to acquire in Dynasty and fantasy football. They're hard to get. So if you could get in on one that's 22 years old that projects to potentially have over 60% of the snap share for running backs, and might I add, I like Dougie Mills, but let me add, probably going to have a high pick next year. And if you have a high pick, you're taking a quarterback in 2023. So that's just a little bit, that's nothing really to hang your hat on, but it's a little bonus. I think Dameon Pierce, if he had Davis Mills next year, still probably a top 12 running back if he has a good season. But just add in there, maybe Bryce Young is there next year. So I wanted to lead this into wide receiver a little bit because there's some similarities, but there's also a lot of difference. Now we have George Pickens. George Pickens can do no wrong this offseason. Everything that this man has done, from standing in front of his TV with whatever he was wearing, a ski mask maybe, and then being drafted in the second round to the Steelers, who cannot miss. They can't miss at wide receiver. I was going over with my brother all the receivers that they've drafted and when the last miss was. It's been a long time. So they cannot miss. So we knew, George Pickens had the injury, so he went a little bit late. But when he went to the Steelers, it's like, okay, probably wheels up. And then, Chase Claypool hasn't helped himself out, albeit with injury. But, I don't know. I'm not going to judge a man for not pushing through. I don't know what injuries he has, but I would do everything I could to be on the field right now if George Pickens was nipping at my heels. So let's talk about George Pickens a little bit. Is this somebody that you want to try to be early on, or is this somebody that you're trying to wait on for the season to start?
Oh, absolutely. I would rather be, because I think it's easier for us to kind of suss out like wide receiver skill at the very beginning. And since like wide receiver skill sets are that there's longevity to their careers, you'd want to be early on them than late, because once that guy hits, the price is almost like astronomical in order to acquire him. Like, think about how hyped we were for, just the simplest guy that I can think of would be like when Chris Godwin came out of Penn State. It was like, we don't know like what he's going to be, because like once everybody saw his size and all that, slot receiver. All right. So he goes, but after we saw him on the field, it's like, he can be like slot plus. Like, everything. Of course, he can do everything.
Right.
That he might be his role. He can do everything. It's like, okay. It transfers, like, skill set transfers. He's got a really good situation, regardless of what we think about Jameis Winston. And then the price has been set, and then even got even higher. Like once like the Bucks,
great
wound up getting
example.
Brady.
Yeah,
so it's like
pretty much the exact same thing.
Right. And can't you just see like the exact same rollout for Pickens over the next couple of seasons? Because it's like, all right, so they're messing around with Mitchell Trubisky. We'll see if Pickett becomes a thing. Of course, they're going to need to evaluate him, since they were, let's just say, not smart in taking Kenny Pickett in the first round, because now they're stuck with having to figure out if he's actually worth like the 5th-year option. Mm-hmm. But let's say in a couple of years, he's not the guy, even though they searched around the globe in order to get him and found the dude next door. But if he's not the guy, they re-up, they have a new quarterback, and then now Pickens goes from a guy that, he's floating around, let's say, in the top 24-ish, and then he automatically vaults into like the top 12, or at least the fringe top 12, because he already has, he's got the age, he's got the quarterback, and we already know that, with Pittsburgh, the fact that, with Matt Canada, assuming he's still a part of the offensive coordinator, like he still has the job, like at that point, we know they want to pass as much as possible. Mike Tomlin isn't that much of a boomer. Then of course he's going to have the workload alongside of him as well. So I think like I would rather be in on a guy like Pickens at this point, because we've already seen him being used in the preseason, just like this past weekend. He was on the field for the majority of the snaps, like with Mitchell Trubisky, also getting targets, not just like down the field, but also once they got into the red zone, scored a touchdown, if I'm remembering correctly, on Sunday. So
yes, Mitch Trubisky led a 2-minute drive for
2-minute drive, like before the end of the first half. So it's like we already see the chemistry there. We already see the role there for him. Now
it was actually Steven Sims who caught that touchdown, though.
That's who it was. Yeah, it was 82. Commander. That's right. Yeah. So it's like, but the role is already there for Pickens. So it can only continue to snowball for him moving forward. Especially the way that he's being used, because it's not like Chase Claypool, where it was like, all right, well, we can use him downfield, we can manufacture some stuff
and
for him.
Those touchdowns.
And the touchdown.
That was weird.
Like, if he's already being used at like multiple levels of the field, like right out of the gate in preseason, at least he should be the full package that you would want for a wide receiver. So yeah, I'm definitely in on him.
Yeah, it's really tough. I had a pretty constructive conversation with somebody on Twitter yesterday who was complaining about all of the hype videos for George Pickens. And really my point about that is they are incredibly annoying. The reason they're annoying is because his value is getting double, triple, quadruple counted because of these hype videos of him pushing cornerbacks down. For one, stop letting him push you down on run plays. Like
he did that too.
Again.
Yeah,
he did
against
it again.
Detroit. He just did it.
I don't know for sure if it was Okuda. But I do. Yeah, it was Detroit. And then 2 weeks prior, if you were even on Twitter as a Detroit Lions quarterback, you knew what was coming. So just strap up. Like, I don't understand why you let him do it again. but it annoys
Mhm.
me because that's double, triple, quadruple counting his value because he keeps pushing people on the ground. Why can't we just have a normal, regular value for him as being a really good rookie wide receiver? So, with that being said, I mean, I would prefer to be early on him, but you know, like that's it's going to cost you. So next, let's get to Laviska Shenault. Let me get you on a little bit of rant to save me here. I'm going to go plug in my laptop, but I am going to kick over to see how much Laviska Shenault you can give us before I get back. So Laviska Shenault was just traded today to the Carolina Panthers. I don't know how much that does for him. What do you think about Laviska Shenault going forward?
I mean, somebody's gonna have to tell me why in a year where or a season where Matt Rule is, dead man walking, and there's not a future for Matt Rule with the Carolina Panthers. So why is he in charge, or why is he being given the authority to trade away? I don't care if it's like a 6th or 7th round pick. Like, why is he capable of trading away future assets like to this team? This is a team that is very much in flux, like regarding their like the most important position, like who they're going to have under center. They locked up DJ Moore, and that's cool. But who's going to be like their wide receiver 2 moving forward? Considering Robbie Anderson was talking about retiring before, like during the preseason, not just a couple months ago. So why are we bringing in a guy like Laviska Shenault? Like, what is his fit like within this offense? And where is the development for the other players that are currently on your team? Where's the development for Terrace Marshall? And what is the exit strategy, or what's the transition plan for a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who's already, like Derrick Henry, getting to that point, like in terms of like the age cliff as well? So I guess I don't understand like what's the team building process for this. Like, it's a similar conversation that we had about the Arizona Cardinals at this point. You can see why like I just can't see why like the Panthers would make this move in order to do that when they have so many other needs that they need to address at this point. But I guess stock up, or I guess minimal stock up for Laviska, because it did seem like he was
Right.
on the outs like with Jaguars anyway. But but he moves to an organization that's in just as much turmoil and uncertainty as the one he just left, if not more so, because at least with Trevor Lawrence, we have a belief that Lawrence can be good moving forward. And Christian Kirk, despite the fact that he got paid an exorbitant amount of money to be the team's wide receiver 1, he can be good. The offensive line, shaky, but can be good. The running backs can be good. Running backs, plural. Like, Panthers only have 1, and he's getting old. So it's like, I have a problem like getting psyched up or getting jazzed up about Laviska moving to this situation where there's not even a clear role for him, like, as of right now. So unless you want to play the long game and stash him for 2023, okay, fine. But even then, like, what are the Panthers going to look like once we get to that point?
And it's really easy to look at the situation and say, I don't care for Laviska Shenault and just be done with him. And that's okay for people who
Yeah.
are. But I will add that people were not dropping Terrace Marshall. He's still rosterable. Well, was. Maybe still is, probably not.
I don't know.
So this is way worse. I mean, it's okay for Laviska Shenault. I think it's a net neutral. I guess Baker Mayfield's fine. Baker Mayfield's not Trevor Lawrence. And Baker Mayfield's probably not the long-term answer there.
Mm-hmm.
So not a lot of positives, but it just really goes to show that Terrace Marshall might not be a thing. And that's really unfortunate because he was like George Pickens, where we thought, man, this guy is going to be a stud. He was injured at the worst time going into the pre-draft process. So he got drafted a little late, but he's going to be great, big, fast, strong, but hasn't panned out. And now it seems like they brought in his replacement.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the weird part about it. It's like, why that particular archetype of receiver? Like, what is it about Laviska that made Carolina want to trade for him? I'm just wondering, like, what the skill set is that, because if you're looking at what Baker Mayfield was good at or has been good at traditionally, I mean, it is those like play action boot type of plays where he throws like outside the numbers. Laviska's skill set is if he catches something in traffic and he's able to create after the catch. That was his whole selling point coming out of college, and why they wanted, at least the selling point for having him as a part of the Jaguars, like for Urban Meyer, slashers. That's what they wanted. Slashers, dynamic playmakers. But that type of play style doesn't fit with what Baker Mayfield does best. So I'm still struggling to figure out like how this is supposed to work.
I don't know if it's really going to do much for his dynasty value. I think that I would still keep Laviska Shenault on my rosters. He's young enough. He is talented. Cheap enough. He would just have to be utilized a proper way. I don't know if he could be Curtis Samuel. I think you'd have to be more like Cordell Patterson to really pay off than
something like that.
Than
Yeah,
Curtis
that's
Samuel.
Pretty much where you have to be at.
And as a wide receiver, you never want to be transitioning to running back. I mean, Deebo Samuel swears that he didn't put any stipulations in for playing any running back, but you can't feel great about it. I don't know that any wide receiver is begging to play running back, but for Laviska Shenault's career, he might. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and I don't think he necessarily wanted that. So before we get into the last two players, I just want to remind everybody that we're the Dynasty Newsletter coming from the Footballguys newsletter brought to your email inbox by Joe Bryant, created by Joe Bryant, Cecil Lammy, and Sigmund Bloom. They bring you all the updates that you need to dominate your leagues. You don't really need 5-6 apps. You just need one email list. So that is the Footballguys newsletter. We are the Dynasty Newsletter. We pluck Dynasty content from that newsletter and talk about what is relevant. One thing that's relevant happened today. Jimmy Garoppolo signs on for another year with the 49ers. I don't think anyone had this on their bingo card. What does it mean for Dynasty? Honestly, for Superflex, I think that you should trade for Jimmy Garoppolo because, in my opinion, everybody's going to have to let the dust settle, and everyone's mad because this isn't one of the things that we thought could happen, but probably best for Jimmy Garoppolo. His market's going to be way bigger next year than with week 1, week 2, week 3, hoping for an injury. And maybe it's not best for the 49ers, but they're probably going to get a comp pick out of it, I would imagine. I haven't seen the contract, but I'd imagine that they probably get a comp pick when Jimmy Garoppolo signs somewhere next year, since they just re-upped his contract. Not 100% on that, but either way, I mean, you're going to get Jimmy Garoppolo super cheap. He is going to be a little bit older, and he's probably got 3 more years as a starting quarterback, and you're going to acquire him for like quarterback 30 to 35 value right now. What do you think about this?
The way that I see it is that, like you were saying, and I believe that's correct. If they wound up cutting him, I think the 49ers would wind up losing a comp pick like that they had done it. So I think with the way that they have the deal structured, it at least keeps the future comp pick intact. And more or less, like with the way that the salary and stuff is set up, if I'm reading this correctly, at least it sets it up well for another team to swoop in during the season and actually get a trade done in season. Which, if John Lynch had played his cards right, like they probably could have gotten that deal done like months ago. But either way, and we talked about this through text, like when it first happened. It's just on August 29th, I can see why the 49ers have done what they've done.
Right.
But if if you'd asked me the same question on like May 29th, like that would have made absolutely no sense. So, but I agree with your point though. Trading for, or at least stashing Jimmy Garoppolo actually does like make a bit of sense at this point. Just for the simple fact that, if you are capable of retaining a quarterback that at least should garner some interest, because I think it's more about not the skill set, it's just been more about his ability to stay healthy, then yeah, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that, why you wouldn't want to keep him on your roster.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends what you have to trade for him, but it's worth having the conversation. If somebody doesn't want to carry Jimmy Garoppolo and eat that roster spot, or if somebody doesn't believe he's a starter in the league in the future, then by all means. But with him, he's going to be a starter again because he's going to have to take whatever money teams are giving him. It's not like he's going to say next year when he's in the free agent market that he's just not going to play if they don't reach a number. That would make no sense. He's going to get he might get 18 million, he might get 35 million. I don't know. But I do know if 18 is his best offer, he's going to start somewhere for 18 million. So it doesn't make any sense to believe that he's not going to be a starting quarterback again. Hell, Mitch Trubisky was a starting quarterback this year for 10 million. So if Jimmy Garoppolo has to play for $10 million, he's going to do it. He's not going to play. He's not going to take no money, and he's not going to be a backup. I might believe that he's backup caliber, but we've talked about this multiple times through this saga. It doesn't matter what we believe. It matters what the NFL believes, and they clearly view Jimmy Garoppolo as a starter. The one thing that's scary, and I hope that this is ridiculous, is that I am dreading the press conference that might say, we just don't think Trey Lance is ready. And that would probably make me throw my laptop out of the window and probably quit, because I don't think that I can actually handle that. And I don't think that Kyle Shanahan could handle that either, because that would probably mean he's fired. I don't think that you can roll with Jimmy Garoppolo at this point. He does have playing incentive. I hope that the playing incentive is just for injury's sake.
Yeah, I mean, so it just, I don't know, it's bad vibes all around, like, to be quite honest.
Yes, bad vibes is correct.
Yeah, because this was, at least the 49ers showed us with their wallets that they wanted Trey Lance to be like their future, with as much as they gave up to move up in the draft in order to take him. And now this is what happens afterwards. I mean, it's just, like I said, it just has to be like just weird, bad vibes, like in the locker room, because I know that a lot of and from the stories that I've read, there are a number of like guys that are still on the team that absolutely love Jimmy. I mean, they want him there in the locker room, but there are others that are, at the same time, everybody's excited to see what the offense can look like with Trey Lance. So it's just like a weird situation, man. But I think the actionable portion of it goes back to what we were saying. We know that there's interest from like around the league, like for Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just been more of a price thing than not. And we've seen him be productive, like as a starting quarterback, like in the NFL. So if you can acquire him for a cheaper price, or for some folks that already dropped him because of the whole like Trey Lance thing throughout the earlier parts of the offseason, picking up and stashing him isn't the worst idea, to be quite honest.
Sure. And to get to the last bit of news for today and continue on with the bad vibes, we do have Brian Robinson took 2 gunshots to the lower body in D.C. I am local to D.C. I work in D.C. There are definitely areas that are quite rough. Everyone around the country knows that. We don't have any details on the situation really yet. I mean, at first he was shot in the arm, and now he's got two gunshot wounds to the lower body. By all accounts, I mean, in terms of being shot, everything's terrible. But on a scale of being shot, it turns out that Brian Robinson's doing fairly well. There's been a lot of arguing on Twitter whether or not you should be talking fantasy football as pertains to Brian Robinson. It really doesn't matter what side you land on, because there's really not a lot of actionable content. When I put him on the sheet, he said, what the heck are we supposed to talk about? Well, the fact that he got shot. Guys don't get shot every day, and that's really, really bad, really, really sad. I remember being a little kid crying about Sean Taylor. I remember wearing my Sean Taylor jersey to school, telling everybody, you know, I was tuned in, you'll say, for an 11, 12-year-old or whatever. So I was telling everybody, no, he's fine, you know, latest news. And then it turns out he wasn't. So definitely afraid of that for Brian Robinson. So I'm watching very closely for that. In terms of fantasy, what advice can we really give that we don't know? He could be out 6 weeks. Guys get lower body surgery all the time. I don't know anything about bullet wound surgery, so I have no idea. And I'm sure there's going to be fantasy doctors coming out and giving us an idea in the coming days. But he might be out 6 weeks. He might be out the season. What we can really look at is just that really Antonio Gibson's value was about to drop a lot. Brian Robinson's value was about to go up a lot. Probably if you want to do some mental gymnastics, you just leave Antonio Gibson close to where he was, maybe a little bit lower. And like, that's it. That's all I've got. I wouldn't take any action on either player right now. I have no idea. I hope it's not season ending. I hope it's not career ending. Hey, ideally, Brian Robinson's playing week 6, and maybe he comes back and takes Antonio Gibson's shot right away. But I just don't know. I don't think any of us really know.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. It's that it's more of a holding pattern for folks that drafted him at this point. And if you were hoping to see him break out this season, but probably have to wait. But for right now, it's just hoping for the best, that like he's just healthy, like not healthy to play football, just healthy.
Yes. I mean, I'm telling you, like Sean Taylor, there were reports he is fine, and very similar. Sean Taylor was a break-in. Brian Robinson was a carjacking. Like, we thought Sean Taylor was good to go. People were already, and I think people have learned that lesson in national media, but people were already discussing Sean Taylor's return timetable, and I think people have learned that lesson. So first, let's just worry about Brian Robinson surviving. And then once the dust has settled there, then you can worry about playing. Redraft, I understand it's tough, but that doesn't change it. That doesn't mean that I have any information. It's tough. I can tell you I drafted Brian Robinson after the news yesterday, if only to be along for the ride. A local guy, just really, really happy that he's okay. He was my last pick, and hey, maybe he gets 6 weeks. So if you want to be like me and have a little bit of emotion involved in your redraft league, took him with my last pick, and I'm happy to be along for the ride. If he misses the season, there's other guys that you can pick up. So if you want to take Sigmund's term, keep him on waiver wire speed dial as soon as you find out maybe a timetable. But we'll focus on making sure he's gonna be okay first, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for today. Thank you all for coming out to the Dynasty Newsletter. Please like, subscribe, rate, review. Remember, we're no longer on the Audible feed, so please go subscribe to our feed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, things like that, and we will catch y'all next week.
Peace.
Peace.